The sport of off-road racing is full of incredible stories, wild characters, legends, and even villains. We cover it all on offroadracer.com, but there's only so much we can put down in an article. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper, and that means sitting down with some of our industry's most influential characters and hitting record. Welcome to the Off-Road Racer podcast, a Mad Media production, made exclusively for offroadracer.com. Each month, we'll go beyond the dirt into the homes, shops, and lives of the most interesting and game-changing icons of our sport. You'll hear about their history, success, failure, and everything in between as we pull back the curtain and reveal the stories of their lives. I'm your host, Matt Martelli, and this is the Off-Road Racer podcast. I'm Matt Martelli. This is Off-Road Racer, and I'm sitting here with my good friend Bryant Blakemore. What's up, brother?
Man, I'm just happy to be here. I appreciate you inviting me to come out here all the way from Texas and have a chat with you.
Yeah, no, it's cool. We've been friends for a while, and we're always talking about the expansion of off-road into Texas, which hopefully we can get to pretty soon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that it is the next frontier of off-road racing. Of course, it has its challenges. You know, I've promoted races out there for quite a few years. I hosted 2 years of solid racing with my association, Tora, and we had a 97-mile loop, man, and it went all the way down to the border of Mexico and all the way back up, and everybody that raced on it that had been to Baja likened it to as close to Baja as you can get in the U.S. The flora, the fauna, the way the dirt changed colors, the scenery as you're driving through, racing through the middle of town, things like that. You know, it's a magical place, and it's got its own complications, like I mentioned. You know, but it is where I see the sport evolving to. You know, in the next 10, 15, 20 years or so. That plus Texas being a pretty healthy business environment is a good all around package for off-roading and outdoor recreation, motorized and not, in general.
Sure.
There just needs to be a lot more education about what we do and how we do it and what all's involved in it and the economic benefits of everything, you know.
And that was in Sierra Blanca.
Sierra
right?
Blanca, yeah. Far West Texas is in Hudspeth County, second largest county in the state, larger than the entire state of Delaware, has a population of about 5,000 people total. And that country out there, from there all the way down south towards Big Bend and Terlingua, and that whole region is just prime country for off-road racing, and there's not a whole lot else that can be done out there except recreational use.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like, obviously, everybody has the stereotypes of Texas, right?
Sure.
But one thing it has going for it is big.
It's enormous, yeah.
So there's a lot of room out there that we could potentially be doing off-road racing. So.
Oh, yeah, and in all different facets. You know, there's pine forest if you go to the east, and there's hill country in the middle, and there's North Chihuahuan Desert in the west. And so there's a little bit of everything for everybody.
Yeah. No, it's really cool. I look forward to getting out there and putting on some major races.
Sure.
I mean, we have a lot of racers that race with us from Texas that are in the oil business and other businesses. So, you know, it's kind of an eventual thing that we definitely want to get to. We've got that state in between us, though, called New Mexico.
Right.
Got to figure that one out. But no, it was actually funny. I was intending on doing a trip over there to Cowboy Cerrone's ranch and the BMF ranch in New Mexico.
Yeah.
He's got some stuff out there he wants us to look at as
Nice.
well. So we're going to do it. You know, it's just a timing thing. But yeah, tell us about, you know, you came out and kind of set the world on fire by driving your truck out from Texas to the Mint.
Yeah.
And then racing the Mint. But you didn't drive it home. Tell us about that experience.
Didn't get to drive it home. So this was my third Mint in this truck. I raced a 3/4 ton 4-wheel drive Dodge. You know, I am from Texas, so I drive a Texas pickup truck. And at the last Mint, I had no power. I was running a 5.7 Hemi with a 5-speed automatic, and as I was going through parts of the course, it basically stalled out on me, and so I had to put it in 4-wheel drive and run the rest of the race in 4-wheel drive. Well, I got video from the guys that were out there, Turn 2 and other guys, and of that section, and it's embarrassing. It was basically flat ground with about 3 inches of silt, and the truck just couldn't do it. So in four-wheel drive, we made it until I split the front differential completely open, and just banging through the ruts. Limited travel, Class 8 truck. While it is 8, it is a limited 8. In that it's a solid front axle. I'm still on leaf springs, and I'm still on coil springs in the front, not coilovers anywhere. And chasing down trophy trucks in that thing was brutal. So we got it home that time, and I spent a year to put it all back together. I met with a local dealership, Scoggin Dickey. They've got a Mopar dealership out where I live, and they saw the truck. They liked what we were doing with our program, and they were like, "What do you want to do with this thing? Do you want more power?" And I was like, "Yeah, everybody wants more power."
That's a question.
But I can't do anything about that power. I said that the number one thing I need to do is get rid of this transmission and put something else in it. And they offered to drop a 6.4 liter 392 Scat Pack motor in it for me, and I agreed to that right off the bat. Absolutely, you guys want to drop a motor in this thing? I'll put your name all over the truck.
Right.
And I picked up an 8 HP 70 8-speed automatic Mopar transmission and stuck that in the truck. It took me a year to get everything back together, re-geared it, got up to 40-inch tires to deal with the ruts from the trophy trucks on 40s and 42s. I was on 37s the first time, or the second time at the Mint. First time also 37s. So we did all those upgrades, built a new front axle, trussed it a little differently, put a spool in the back, and by the time I got everything done, I'm a one-man band. I've got buddies that come over and help, and I've got a few companies that help me a little bit with parts and things like that, but 95% of my program is me turning wrenches and me spending the money. And so it's very time-consuming and difficult for me to get things done on time. And I'm out in Texas, and so if I need specialty off-road racing parts, they usually are not local, and sometimes it can be hard to track that stuff down. But we got it together. It took a year, almost exactly, from the time I unloaded it off the trailer to the time I got it back running again, because the second Mint that we did was the one in December, so we took the year to get it back together. I got it fired up, and I made it run, which was amazing because by that time, all of the supply chain issues due to COVID had started catching up to me and my projects.
Yeah.
And I was starting to see that there were things being more difficult to obtain. Luckily, through the dealership, I was able to squeak in and get an engine harness and get a computer and then figure out why that computer is not communicating and get it all sorted out. Well, we got it running and driving, and I drove it around the block at the shop about 3 weeks before the Mint, and then I had to go to work for 2 weeks, and I work out of town. When I got back, I was like, man, I need to put miles on this. The owner's manual on this new motor, brand new motor, 0-mile motor, says you got to put 1,500 miles on it before you can hammer it. And there's a lot of people who'll say, well, break it in the way you're going to run it. And a $6,000.
That doesn't include the Mint course.
No,
I guarantee you.
No,
right?
and a $6,000 engine that I don't have any miles on. I was a little hesitant to just go hammer on it and see what it'll do. So I said, you know what? This truck is almost there. It looks like a truck. I've got a title for it. Let's just register this thing, and I'll get insurance on it, and I'll put lights on it, and let's drive it all the way to Vegas. And everyone was like, what? I said, yeah, we're just going to drive the race truck to Vegas. I had a piece of plexiglass made for a windshield. Thank God. That made the drive actually enjoyable. Without that, it would have been awful.
Right.
And it was right at about 1,000 miles. And we loaded that thing up 3 days before the race. I did some burnouts and donuts in front of Starbucks, filled it full of gas, and we hit the highway. And our first stop was the dealership on the way out of town. We found that my rear brake calipers had come loose, so we tightened those up. And then we hammered down, and it took us 2 days, and we pulled into Vegas, and all the truck did was drink gas. That's it.
Yeah.
We didn't have to stop for anything. It was incredible.
It's really cool. It's like we almost need to have a different class, or a different prize for like people who drive their vehicle
right
to the race it, and drive it home, because that's what all the old timers did back in the day.
Oh yeah.
You know,
oh yeah, for
I
sure.
remember Kurt LeDuc was one of the guys who, you know, he would drive his vehicle to races, race it, and then drive it home. And
Drive it home, yeah.
you know, and then of course, like guys that were coming from up north in Crandon, same thing. They're like, they couldn't afford a trailer, you know, and it's another truck, so they just drove the race cars, you know, to the race. So
it was rad.
It's pretty cool. I mean, and it creates a cool story from, you know, it's been done a couple times. I've seen it lately, you know, guys who raced 1,000 and stuff, and then they drove the vehicle home. I think one of the Broncos did it. I don't remember.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was a Bronco that was actually built in Australia, came over and did the race, and then, you know, drove home to wherever their home was.
Right.
But it's cool. You know, it just proves the durability of the vehicle, and that it highlights that you're racing a street vehicle. You know?
Right. You know, at least close enough, you know, to a street vehicle. And what was really cool is we had our booth set up at Tech and Contingency for the charity that I was working with for this race. And I had people come up and they were like, oh, we saw this on Instagram and we saw this and that. And then I had a guy come up and say, man, we passed you on the highway. And I had a couple other people send me messages on Instagram and whatnot, or screenshots of them doing flybys of me on the highway.
Nice.
I thought that was rad. That was super
that's cool.
rad.
It lets everybody kind of like know that this sport is attainable. You know? Like you can build a vehicle and come race in your garage with your buddies.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and I was real proud of my Mint 400 Texas plates.
Yeah, there you go.
Thing. So I was stoked to be able to get those too.
Yeah, definitely.
Those on it.
No, and tell us about like you know, what's the state of racing in Texas right now?
Sure. So there's a couple associations that are currently racing. Mine is not currently one of them. The biggest being the TDRA, the Texas Desert Racing Association.
Right.
And in some form, whether by name or by people or what have you, that association in a few different dresses, so to speak, has been around for about 30 years. So there's been desert racing in Texas for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
It's the state has advantages and disadvantages, just like almost anywhere. The main advantages to Texas is that the land is private, and so you don't have to have federal permission to do anything. You've got, you know, as long as you find a singular landowner, or if it's multiple landowners or corporate ownership that they pass off on what you want to do, that's it. You're done. You don't have to talk to anybody about it because the land is private. That said, it is a little more difficult to find those landowners and people that are okay with you coming out and doing this extremely dangerous, mildly destructive activity. And that's where the education comes in, which is kind of the focus that I've shifted myself to at the moment, is to just educate people on what off-road racing is, what is protected by state statutes. I've got them all almost memorized, in that Texas is very good about protecting its landowners from a liability standpoint. They want their landowners to enjoy outdoor recreation. And under some of the definitions of outdoor recreation, under the statutes of agritourism, includes recreational driving. Well, that's what we do, is recreational driving. You know, and so landowners are protected in that manner. And then we carry insurance and all of those things like that, you know. Another advantage to Texas is that some of these private landowners own 100,000 plus acres.
Yeah, there's some big ranches
with
in
only
Texas.
One fence around the outside.
Yeah.
You know, that I know of a piece of property that I'm trying to work some deals on that's got 700 miles of roads and trails on it that are not paved. They're just dirt and 2-track and Jeep trails and whatnot. 700 miles on one property. You know, you could set up a cloverleaf race where you've got, you know, 100-mile loops, and you've got a center pit, and you do 100-mile laps, and you've got one round of that. So that's a 400-mile race on one person's property.
Right.
You know, and it's gnarly terrain in some of those places, and it's beautiful, beautiful places to see. You know, so that's where I'm at now with my association is that the education aspect of it, talking to landowners and making them feel more comfortable with what we're doing, explaining that off-roaders are some of the most conservation-minded people on the planet, because if we destroy it, we can't go back and get it. It's the same concept of animal conservation through hunting programs.
100%.
Taxes off of ammunition and buying guns and things like that goes towards conservational efforts.
Yeah.
So the hunters pay to protect the things that they're hunting. Same thing. Off-roaders protect the places where they want to off-road. Otherwise, they won't get to go back. And so that's kind of a new concept there in Texas because we don't have the public land aspect of it. Another hurdle that I'm facing is that the state owns about 13 million acres of Texas, and that land is leased back to people for different activities, including recreation. However, the money from those leases is supposed to go back to a public school fund. So it's public land per se. The taxpayers and whatnot pay for that. But there are complications in dealing with the state government and their use of that land and what they understand the use that you want to have on it is. And so that's a hurdle that I've dealt with. I've gone as far as hiring a lobbyist firm out of my own pocket in Austin to represent me in dealings with the state, to try to have these conversations.
Right.
And the way I see the future of it is that not only would I like to put on an event and do that, I don't want to just put on one event. I'd like to put on multiple events.
So Mitch, why is this bike so drippy?
It's our 23 race bike. We can start up front, work our way to the back. Bones can tell you about the suspension.
The rear shock is one of the most critical parts of the bike.
Pegs with the titanium mounts.
Kashima coating here.
Anti-gravity lightweight battery.
Young's modulus.
Horse and a half.
Works chassis lab.
More tie than a space shuttle.
Really? I might need that repeated.
This thing slaps.
Slaps.
Oh, you should have told me that earlier.
I'd like to show these smaller rural communities what the economic benefit could be of them embracing this. You were talking on a previous episode of this podcast about Parker and how Parker is like, yeah, bring it. We know what this does.
Well, and I think now too that because of us, and I'll give King of the Hammers credit too, like we've made that the financial side of it like
sure
a talking point, visible. Right. So yeah, when you look at, I agree with you. When we look at the future of off-road racing, when you look at the future of even just parks and rec, right? Like we are the people who are going to pay for it.
Yep.
Ultimately, so, and I have no problem with that, but we just want access and we want to enjoy, those trail systems responsibly,
right.
Like nobody does the work that we do with cleaning the desert, and we'll continue to do that and expand that. And hopefully, more people will do that, and see what we're doing and understand that it's our responsibility to take care of these areas. So, I think it's definitely changing, people are changing their point of view as to, how they look at off-roaders. It used to be like, oh, we just line up and, charge through the desert and we're just driving over everything. And that's not reality. I mean,
right.
I think I'd said it before that we're using, for the Mint, we use such a small piece of the Mojave Desert. Like we can't even measure it. It's a fraction of a, it's of a percentage, right? So, we're barely, using anything. I mean, every other use of that area is far more destructive than off-road racing, especially things like solar panels. They just devastate the area and they devastate the animals. So, like I said, you and I have been talking for a long time about Texas. We're going to definitely get there. It's just, to me, it's a matter of time. We got Parker. We have the California 300. Texas race would be a real nice round off, right?
Right, yeah.
But and I know that like in our experience with action sports, I remember going to Texas and it was a hard market to break for skateboarding in the beginning.
Yeah.
But then it became one of our biggest stops.
Right.
So, I know there's by nature, the majority of people there are already off-roading, right?
Right.
It's just a matter of kind of, waving the flag and going, all right, this is the event. It's going to be here. It's this time of year, and getting everybody together.
Right.
So I look forward to that.
Yeah, some of the competition that off-road events would have, or outdoor recreation, motorized outdoor recreation would have in Texas. In far west Texas, there's some ranching, but if you look at the land, you know that that's kind of hobby farming. The terrain is not conducive to good beef production or good, goats or sheep or anything like that. But they do have a strong hunting influence.
Right.
So off-roading would have to work around that until it started making more than what hunts would bring in, and then your landowners would see that financial benefit to them could work out in that manner, and that's doable, because the hunting seasons, while the weather is nicer for hunting in Texas than it is for off-roading in the summertime, you can fit it in between.
Sure.
and inject those income streams. Our races, as small as they were, we had maybe 30 to 35 competitors, from motorcycles to trophy trucks at a single event. We were in town for maybe 4 days.
Right.
Every business in Sierra Blanca would earn a fiscal quarter's worth of revenue in 4 days of racing.
Yeah.
So the community itself, in town, they completely understood what the benefit to them was. It put them on the map for something other than being a nuclear dump depot, according to Bernie Sanders a few years ago. That's what he said Sierra Blanca was good for. And then there was another time where the city of New York was sending human waste out by train and dumping it out there in a big open pit or something like that. So you want to talk about a shithole. It was literally a shithole, unfortunately. And that the people in Texas, as most people are aware of, are very proud. And if you can give them something to be proud of that makes them money, that brings other people in to see their community and to see how they live and understand their culture, in that part of the region, it's going to be a big benefit to them.
Yeah.
Convincing the landowners that they can make a little bit of money on it as well, and that we're not going to tear up their place like they think we are, and that they're protected if somebody rolls their car or something like that. It's all in line there. And then the expansion of that is letting the landowners know that they can turn their properties into recreational properties year round and make money off of it. People want to go there and camp, and people want to go there and ride downhill mountain bikes and all of these different kinds of things. And people want to go there and take their horses or go backpacking or whatever.
Sure.
And you can structure communities around that are no longer thriving and turn them into an oasis for outdoor recreation.
I
think
100%
there's huge
agree with
potential
you.
of that.
Like the case study really is like the gene area that we operate the men in. When we started there, I think there were two rental operators. Now there's like 12, and all of them are busy constantly.
Yeah.
Because what they're doing is they're telling everybody, hey, you want to come out and drive a UTV on the Mint course and see the Mojave Desert, and it's right there next to Vegas. So I agree with you. So being from Texas, like, how did you get involved in off-road racing?
Sure. So originally I'm from South Texas, right on the border with Mexico. I was born in Brownsville, raised in a town called Los Fresnos, and right down by South Padre Island, which may be the only thing that people are familiar with down there. And I've got no connection to motorsport in my family. My family doesn't race. My family's not really into cars. I'm the screwball of everyone, and I've made up for it by owning a whole bunch of cars that no one else wanted, and things like that. So it was an interesting route for me to get here. When I was about 7 years old, my family sat me down with a family friend. They went over to visit in Brownsville one day. It was this guy, Edward Caso. He's from Mexico, and he'd been involved in Porsche Cup racing and like the Grand Prix in Mexico City back when that happened in the 70s and 80s, early 80s. He was also involved in like some NASCAR type racing in Mexico, and he was showing me pictures on his couch of all these things. And this, to some of the audience, this is a real picture book and not Facebook. These were actual photographs.
Analog.
Right. And as we flipped back through that album, the pictures started getting dustier and dustier. Not that they were old and not looked at, but the actual content of the pictures was the desert. And I started seeing square body Chevys and Baja Bugs and little single seat buggies and things like that. And that clicked in my 7-year-old mind. I'm like, the Formula One cars and all that's cool, but what is this? And he said, well, that's Baja. And that was the first time in my life that I had ever heard of Baja or anything like it. And somehow it was just welded to the back of my brain that you need to go to Baja and you need to do it in your own truck sometime. And it took me, I was probably 30 years old, 20, I guess like 28 or so. So it took me like 20 years, 21, 23 years before I had opportunity to figure out how to get there. And I could financially afford it and had time to do it and whatnot. And when it happened, I dove in head first. I'd started watching YouTube videos and things on TV whenever I could catch those. I never had cable or anything like that, so I didn't get a lot of any special ESPN channels or anything like that. And the ABC coverage back in the 90s was not something that we got when I was a kid, growing up down there. But when I started finally working and making money and whatnot, I had an opportunity to start doing some off-road things. I'd put fiberglass fenders on a pickup early on and whatnot, a 3/4 ton Dodge, of course.
Right.
And jumped it a couple times, and it was just always in the back of my mind. I had a T-shirt that I bought while I was in college in Wyoming from a company called 4130 Clothing, and it had a cat eye Chevrolet on it with long travel and rack of lights across the roof, and I was 17, 18. I was like, man, this Baja dream is still alive. And when I got to the point where I felt like I could do something about this was about 2015. I had a twin turbo 1,000 horsepower Cummins street truck, sold that, had a little money in my pocket that I could just burn. Called up a couple of my friends and I said, hey, y'all want to go to Baja? And I knew they had the means financially and had time, and they immediately said, oh yeah, that's something we want to do. I'd been involved in motorsports before that, mainly diesel performance. Back in 2012, I imported a drag truck, full carbon fiber drag truck from Thailand to come race at the National Hot Rod Diesel Association World Finals and brought their team over to do that. So I'd been involved in motorsport, but being in West Texas, never knew how to get connected to off-road and to Baja. Then I got my buddies together. That same year is when I started the Tejas Off-Road Racing Association with my partner Roger at that time. And so, like I said, when I dove in head first. I sold my street truck and I went full off-road. And I started a race association and went shopping for a desert truck.
And this is before you'd been in a race.
Oh, I had been to one race.
What race was it?
It was probably Best in the Desert. It was in Vegas during like September-ish.
Okay.
I flew out there by myself for my birthday. I was like 22 or 23. I rented a 1952 Jaguar, and I drove around, and I drove that Jaguar all the way out to Primm and down one of the dirt roads to get to one of the spectator areas. And that was my first time to get close.
Sure.
Drove through and looked into pits and saw trophy trucks driving by, and I thought, okay, this is what I've been dreaming it was. I want to continue this. And then it just kind of stayed in my mind until I had the money and called my buddies and said, hey, let's do this. And we started shopping. And the three of us were all from Texas. We'd been buddies through diesel performance stuff and whatnot. We're all from West Texas. And at that time, all living there. And so we set our criteria, and everything I do, while it may appear haphazard, has had a lot of thought put into it before I execute the plan. I do a lot of shopping. I spend a lot of time looking around and reading and writing and studying things before I make a decision to do something. And that process went us talking about it, decided we wanted to do it. We put together a budget. We said, okay, everything that we spend on this race program, we'll just split evenly into thirds. That's fair. We'll split the driving into thirds, and if someone doesn't want to drive, then someone else can jump in, no big deal, but the money in thirds. And that's how I could afford to do it right off the bat, to jump right in like that.
Right.
And we said, well, we're from Texas, so we want a pickup truck. We want a V8, and it needs to be previously Score, Best in Desert tagged.
Right.
Because we don't want to buy something, some basket case, and have to completely cut it apart. One of my partners at that time was an extreme fabricator. He was very good. So we had the skills to build anything that we wanted. But we figured that the best way to spend our money and the quickest path for us was to get something that had already been approved by where we wanted to race. And our goal was the Score Baja 1000. That was our goal.
Sure.
So we start shopping. I post up on Race Desert, hey, this is what we're looking for. And people just laugh. They laugh at us. Oh, you'll never find that. We set a budget of about $25,000. And we said, we want a complete truck, $25K, V8 pickup truck. That's what we want. We don't care what make, model, doesn't matter, suspension, doesn't matter. We just want something that's already been done and used, and that's what we want. Nah, you'll never find that. You'll never. And I said, well, you don't know me. You don't know how long I'll shop before I find the right deal. I'm very patient when it comes to finding the right deal on something that I want like that. I was coming back from pre-running some potential race course out in Sierra Blanca area with my partner of the series, and Jared, one of my partners in the race program, texts me. He says, hey, if you had seen this, I know you would have said something, but here it is. And it was a link on Race Desert on the classifieds to a 2003 Dodge 2500 four-wheel drive that had raced the Baja 1000 4 times back in 2006, 7, 8, and 9. Had done okay, had finished, one time. I think they had one DNF, but the rest of the times they finished and whatnot. And that vehicle just spoke to me and said, hey, this is the one. One of the benefits to that truck was that both my partners, Matt and Jared, all three of us had owned a third-gen Dodge pickup,
Right.
3/4 or 1 ton. So we were familiar with the platform. It was something that looked good to us, and we recognized it. We were like, that's the truck.
Right.
So I keep looking through the ad, and I'm like, okay. And then he's got the price listed, and it's $25,000. I'm like, man, that's right on the edge of our budget. It's a bit high. And then I see the location, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be even more complicated. And then my partner in the race series said, hey, let me look at that. And he looked at the ad, and he leaned over and he said, hey, this price is in Canadian dollars. I'm like, well, I don't know what that means. So Googled it up. It was like 19.5 or something like that. I said, oh, that's it. Is there a phone number on there? I don't know what time it is there, but I'm calling. I called old Richard Thomas up. He's the guy that owned the truck and had raced it in the past. And I called him and I said, hey, man, I'm calling about this truck that you've got on Race Desert for sale. Tell me about it. He said, well, it's Score legal. It's been down there. We just don't want to make the trip anymore. We don't want to drive all the way from Canada down. I said, is it in Canada? He said, yeah, it's up here with us. I said, okay, well, I want it.
Right.
But I've imported race cars into the United States before, and it's going to take me about 3 months to do all the paperwork and get it done legally and properly and all that kind of stuff. Well, do I need to send you a deposit or anything like that on it? And he said, well, what are you going to do with it? I said, well, we're going to race the Baja 1000. He said, it's yours, man. Just tell me when you're ready to come get it.
Right.
And then a couple months went by. I did all my paperwork to import it correctly, and we drove up over Thanksgiving, November of 2015. And it was like minus 20 degrees when we got there, and snow and ice on the ground. And I test drove that truck, no windshield, no windows, no nothing. Test drove it around his neighborhood. And man, it was the coolest thing I'd ever done in my life up until that point.
Right.
And we made a deal on the truck. I was like, man, 19.5, it's a little high. I always got to haggle a little bit, see who's going to win that conversation there. And I'm like, man, I drove all the way from Texas. I'm here. I've got cash. Can you do any better? He was like, well, I'll throw in this spare radio and this spare Lowrance, and how about 18.5? I was like, deal. That truck's got $20,000 worth of shocks on it.
Yeah.
So we picked it up for 18.5, hooked it up, went to the border. It was a suicide run up and back. Get to the border, and the guy leans out. We hand him all this stack of paperwork to bring this truck across, and it had a wrap on it that said Carly Suspension on the side. That's who originally had put the truck together with them. And the guy at the booth leans out, and he's like, does that truck have a Dominator kit on it? And I was like, oh man, he knows the parts, so he knows we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
It took us about 15 minutes at the border. I had one copy on the paperwork that didn't copy the full page. I had to sign something at the bottom. They didn't even look at it. It was 1:30 in the morning, and then we hauled back to Texas. And
all right, Chase, number 23, it's 2023. This championship's yours. Let's show these guys what's up.
Easy, boys. It's not over yet. Big dog still gotta eat.
Whatever you say, big dog.
Seriously? These fools think I'm pride?
They know the deal.
And we spent the next year, 2016, my team raced both Texas series at that time, my series and the TDRA. And we wanted to prove a point as well as use it as an educational experience. And this is the way that I talk to anybody that comes to me about getting into racing new. I say, buy a vehicle that's already done. Don't try to build one from scratch. You'll never get it done unless you have the money to drop it off somewhere. And 2, race local. Race local so you're not spending $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 just to have a DNF. Race local so that you can learn your vehicle, so that you can learn your pit strategy. You can learn how your team is going to operate with each other. You can learn all of the facets. You can learn whether or not you're going to want to be in the car that long, because you put some people in an off-road car and they can't do it for more than 15 minutes.
That's actually really sound advice, like 100%, like especially the vehicle part of it is like, as a promoter, one of the things I hate doing is denying people entry because of technical things on their vehicle, right? So, that transfer of knowledge, like, is important. But yeah, go buy a used vehicle. Like, get your feet wet before you go full ham.
Right.
As much as I appreciate the guys who come in.
Oh yeah, and I won't discredit somebody that really wants to do that.
But I also look at it and I go like, man, all the best guys came up through the ladder system. Like, it was funny. We were talking about Luke McMillan the other day. I have a photo that I took of him when he got his first 16 car. Actually, it might have been a 10 car, and it was at a FUD race. And it's like, yeah, everybody knows him as, the badass trophy truck driver, but he had to go, 16, 10, class 1, and then into trophy. And that's why he's so good. That seat time and understanding the mechanics and everything else is so valuable. So, and then to your point, like race local, like that's one thing, with UTVs, we started to see more of these local race series. Yeah. And I think that's really cool and really important, because when we go to an area and look at like, hey, Texas, for example, like potentially holding a race here, we want to see that there's 20 smaller things. Right. Then we know that there's a support system to the culture's there, right? Yeah. So then we can confidently roll in and go, okay, we'll pull, the entries and the spectators and all the different things that we know that we need to put on a major event, so that it's not just this transient thing where everybody from California, Nevada, Arizona has to travel in. Right. Some of them will travel, some of them won't. Right. But as we, go to new places, we want to build the culture there, Absolutely. But racing local, it's funny because like even here, quite a few of the guys do it. I wish more of them would do it, but they race with some of the smaller leagues in the U.S. and there's some great ones in Mexico, Code and Record, right. Both great race leagues, just tons of fun racing those races. Oh yeah,
and you can't discredit wheel time in the car. No, and if you can do it for a $300 to $600 entry fee and do it with a short race where there's 30 other cars on the course instead of 130 other cars on the course, you don't have to be freaking out as a first-time racer. Who's coming up behind me, and what happens if I get hit, and how do I do this, and how do I do that? You've got space and room to learn and do all that kind of stuff, and it supports that local series where they can continue to put on events and whatnot, and you just get that cheaper wheel time in that car. And all time in the car is good time in the car because you learn something new every time you go out.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, and then you can apply that to the bigger ones. Now, I won't discredit the guys that say, I'm going to do the Baja 1000. Have you ever done this before? No, but that's the one I'm going to do, and I'm going to do that one right off the bat. And I'm like, okay, but just hear me out. You know, before you jump down to Mexico and go on this wild, crazy adventure,
There's a lot to learn.
there's a lot between here and there that can help you have a more successful time. I don't know about you, but I can't spend 30 to 40 grand expecting to go down there and win first place in something I've never done before and end up with a DNF 10 miles from the start line, and I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
You know, preparation is key.
It's key, but I've also learned, like, and I've been in Baja since I was 12, you know, so I know it. And, you know, but you're right. Preparation is key. And it's also putting yourself in a position where you can really enjoy it.
Right. Exactly.
You know,
exactly.
like I see a lot of teams go down, whether it's Baja or our races, and they're just like hair on fire. Right. And I'm like, man, like I appreciate the grind and the hustle you guys are going through. But if you would just start prepping sooner and start preparing and
Right.
just, you know, kind of think it through long before you're at the race, or 2 weeks before the race,
Right.
or whatever it is, right? That you're going to enjoy it more. You know, you're going to go there, you're not going to be stressed, you're going to have all your stuff in order, and then you can really enjoy it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
definitely. Yeah, and that, you know, you don't want your pit crew, which is usually all volunteers.
Yeah.
Most of my pit crew for these last couple races, it's all Dodge guys that I've known through somewhat Dodge forums and whatnot. A lot of them are from SoCal, and they all have 3/4 and 1 ton trucks built to boogie, and so that's kind of been my trademark that I've developed. I wasn't originally a Mopar guy, but it's turned out that way.
But now you are.
And now I am, and I'm proud of that. But I put together crews of people that I don't know, you know, and I'm throwing them into the fire per se. So it's my responsibility as the organizer of everything to make sure that they have what they need to be successful while I'm in the race car, and that they enjoy what they're doing, so that when I'm racing and I'm enjoying what I'm doing, that they are having a good time as well, and I don't end up pulling into a pit and everyone's in a fist fight and I can't get gas.
Yeah.
You know, and so if you throw your crew together last minute and you don't talk about what you're going to do and you don't make any kind of plans and you just go down there and then you get in the race car, everyone is looking to the driver of record most of the time as the person that has the answers.
Sure.
Because they're usually the person footing the bill and the person that says, hey, do you want to go racing with me? It's the guy in the car.
Yeah.
And when he leaves, everyone is like, well, I don't know what we're supposed to be doing here. You know, and that could end up being a bad experience for everyone all around. So having that time to prepare and get to know your guys and have those conversations, I find it's really important.
No, it's crucial.
And
It's crucial.
that's why we raced in Texas for our first year. We did those 2 series. When my team was racing in my series, I was hands off. You know, I don't like that you get into a race car at your own event, because there are things to be doing at your own event. You got to take care of everybody else.
Yeah, 100%.
That's the responsibility. And so I left my guys alone, which was a good test for them. Could they do all this without me?
Right.
You know, not saying that I'm the most important person ever out there, but I was the one starting all of this. So I wanted to see how they were going to work on their own. And they did great. They took first in points championship in my series, and we took second in points championship in the second Texas series. We had we raced 8 races. We had 1 DNF, our very, very first race, because we took a gamble on some prep to learn our truck, and it bit us. And then next after that, I had a guy call me up. He said he found me on the internet. Excuse me. And said, hey, do you want to go to Baja and chase for me? And I was like, yeah, that's been my dream my whole life. What do I need to do? And he said, well, show up to San Diego and I'll cover the rest. And I was like, plane tickets bought, I'm there.
Right.
I didn't know this guy. He didn't know me. And I show up and he picks me up. We go to Ensenada and we do the Nora Mexican 1000 in 2016. And he hydrolocks the motor in his truck 40 miles from the start line on day 1. And I thought, oh man, so this is what it's going to be like.
Dude, it's so common, right? You know, just people just come in, you know, hair on fire, and they get it handed to them, and unfortunately, off-road racing is not forgiving at all.
Right.
Between equipment and the terrain, anything that will go wrong, right? So and I hate seeing it when people show up and they're either not prepared or they don't have the correct resources. Like in that particular situation. Like, I know he didn't have a spare engine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he probably should have if he was going to Nora. It was such a long race that you want all those spares. But I remember we were talking about this last night, and but that wasn't the end of your Nora, was it?
No, not at all. He luckily the person I went with had a great attitude. He had raced motorcycles in Baja before, and that was part of what got him in trouble. Was he was driving his truck like it was a motorcycle,
right?
And when you come up to a water crossing, you pin it and lift that tire in the front a little bit and stay above the water. You can't do that in a truck because then your throttle bodies are wide open and it just consumes everything that comes right in.
Yeah.
But luckily, he had a good attitude about it, and he was like, "Well, that's racing. Let's load the car back up." And I thought, "Oh man, we just started this whole thing. Are we going home?" And he was like, "What do y'all want to do?" I said, "Well, I'm here. I'm here to be here. So what's going on?" We take the car back to Ensenada, dump the trailer, and then we go screaming through the desert in the middle of the night to get to San Felipe and catch up with the rest of the race. And we follow the rest of Nora all the way down to Cabo.
Nice.
We teamed up with the guys at Ultimate Arm, that build those.
Yep, George.
George, that build those rigs sitting on top of all their
George
cars.
is a homie. He's a good dude.
Yeah. So Steven, the guy that I went with, knew him real well. And we started pitting for his crew and whatnot, and they were racing a 3-seat Class 1 car that usually has a camera rig on the roof. Yeah, they just
pulled the camera rig off.
Pull the rig off and go racing.
Yeah.
And hanging out with them the whole time, I got to meet a lot of people that gave me an opportunity to network quite a bit and see Baja for the first time. I was constantly just wide-eyed looking around. This is awesome. I hadn't been to Mexico since I was a kid. Mainland Mexico, we would go a lot when I was young, and we'd go camping in, north central Mexico area and had a really good time down there. And then cartel stuff started happening and we couldn't go anymore.
And it sucks because that area, in particular, like Copper Canyon and all that stuff, is just beautiful.
Oh yeah.
It's just beautiful.
There, one of my favorite places in that part of Mexico is a place called Tamasopo. Tamasopo, within a mile in any direction, you'll run into a waterfall. It's unbelievable, and the people down there are so nice, and the food is amazing and whatnot, but getting down there is treacherous now. And so finding Baja still being comfortable was awesome to me, to have a place where I felt at home.
And Nora is a really good event to kind of get your feet wet because it's not like the 1,000. It's not high pressure.
Right. So the description to me from people that I talked to that first time I went down there, they said, it's still a race, and you're doing 1,300 to 1,500 miles. It's a lot. You race every single day, 200 to 400 miles every day. But Nora is like roughhousing with your buddies in the parking lot and then going into the bar and drinking a beer.
Right.
And having a good time.
Right.
Whereas the Baja 1000, covering similar mileage over similar distances down the peninsula or the loop or whatever you're going to do, covering some of the same course sections, is stepping into the ring with a prize fighter.
Yeah.
And you not knowing how to box.
Yeah.
And sitting in there for 48 hours.
Yeah.
And then going home to cry.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
Basically, yeah. That's a good analogy.
So
racing against your dad is something that 90% of the racers in the world will never get.
I've accomplished everything I wanted to do, and now he's just like taking the reins. I want to be remembered for being a huge part of short course, not just racing, keeping it alive, helping it grow. If it comes down to the last weekend and I'm in it, the boys better watch out.
When we got down to Loreto that first time, George was like, "Hey, you brought your race gear?" I said, "Yeah, I brought it just in case." And he said, "Well, do you want to get in the car?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to get in the car." So I jump in that back seat, and man, we cruise Loreto to La Paz, right along the coast on those big red cliffs and everything.
Oh, that's a bitchin' section.
It was perfect.
Especially like right south of La Paz when you come up over that mountain and then there's that right-hander, because otherwise you go into the ocean.
Right in the ocean, yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area, and then running along the coast there all the way down to like East Cape and eventually to Cabo, it's just
it was
killer.
It was rad. I was so thankful for that opportunity, and all of these things have continued to culminate together and tell me that I'm where I belong.
100%.
You know, it's been my dream since I was 7. It took me 20 plus years to get there, but I'm here, and every opportunity I say yes. And I make it work, whatever it takes to make it work. And I'm in awe of all of it. And I'm so thankful and grateful for these opportunities, the networking that I've been able to make. I'm sitting here with you, and, you know, last month, a couple months ago, you were talking with BJ Baldwin and you were talking with Blake Wilkie. I'm Bryant Blakemore from South Texas. I'm a nobody, you know.
But that's what this culture is about. Here's the thing: is everybody who created this culture, they were nobodies.
They were nobodies.
You know, and it's funny because it's this thing of like, yeah, of course, now we have this very high level of racing on the trophy truck side that, you know, requires a lot of money,
sure,
right?
Sure.
But that wasn't what made this culture, right? What made this culture was nobodies.
It was garage guys.
Yeah, it was guys who come back from World War II. You know, veterans, mechanics, construction workers, regular.
Oh, it's blue collar.
Yeah, regular blue collar people. Yeah. And they're like, hey, man, this sounds like fun.
Right.
You know, and then to your point, it's like it escalates, right?
Right.
And everybody's like, well, you know, you get the Lynn Chennis that are like, I can make it faster, right? And then you get the Jim Coes and you know, all the different vehicle builders, but that didn't all drop out of the sky.
Exactly.
You know, even it was funny because, you know, hopefully soon I can get Rick Geiser on, and we had a discussion about him and his brother's beginnings, and it was, you know, sweeping floors and you know, for all the OG builders, and then coming up that ladder system, and then eventually building, you know, their legacy of trophy trucks. So that it's an important idea to not just embrace, but to make sure that we carry that forward, right?
I agree.
Is that this isn't, you know, this culture that's what it's about. It's about the blue collar, the middle America, regular people who want to go do something remarkable, you know, with themselves, with their family, with their friends, right? And, you know, that's what this culture is about.
Yeah, I support that 100%. You know, my background before all this, all through college and whatnot, I cowboyed for a living. I worked out of a saddle in ranches in Wyoming and New Mexico, and some in Texas, and helping out friends in Nebraska and things like that. And then I got an offer to start working in the oil field, you know, and in some kind of specialized department. And I still do that today. I've progressed a little bit in it. You know, I drill horizontal oil wells for a living.
Right.
But it's blue collar is my background. And the fact that a person like me who has a dream to do this, I've run into naysayers, of course. You know, they're everywhere. But for the most part, this sport has welcomed me in a way that I've never felt welcomed anywhere.
Well, that's what I think is really cool, you know, is that we champion the little guy, right? Yeah. And like, you know, it's funny because when you look at like all the stories that come out of a race, you know, okay, like BJ, right? He's expected to win.
Right.
If he doesn't win, people are like, "Oh man, what you know what I mean? What happened?" Yeah. But the guy from Texas who drove his race car, he's not. Everybody's looking at that, going, "Okay, well, that's cool," but there isn't the expectation. So when you have people that willingly throw themselves into the fray, like that's celebrated. We don't care who you are. We don't care who your parents are, how much money they made, whatever. If you're willing to, pull the sword from the stone and be one of us, then we're like, all right, let's go. Because you're gonna find out, that's that thing, where there's a lot of people that talk a lot of shit about a lot of things that they coulda, woulda, shoulda done, right? But just getting into the mindset of throwing yourself into the fray of off-road racing, like that automatically separates you from the rest of the world, right? And I think now that's become more important because people are so full of shit, you know, between social media and everything else. It's like, I think more and more people are seeking other people like that, and they want that, right? I know I do, right? I know I do. I look at stuff and I'm like, I'm thoroughly impressed by people's, you know, tenacity, savagery, whatever you want to call it. It's like the deeper and harder that they dig and fight through adversity, it's, you know, makes me more and more impressed, and it gives me the energy to do the same things, right?
Yeah.
You know, I look at certain things that our predecessors have done, and I'm like, oh man, Sal Fish pulled this off back in the day. We should be able to do that.
Right, exactly.
Mickey Thompson pulled this, all sorts of, you know, accomplishments and feats. And, you know, like, I think that's one of the things about our culture is that we celebrate really what's true about being an American, which is, you know, anything is possible.
Right. And that's one thing that I found, you know, I sometimes have a difficult time talking about things like this because I don't want it to appear that I'm trying to toot my own horn, so to speak.
Sure.
Because I'm not. But I really believe that if I can do this, anybody can do whatever their dream is, you know, and this is just something that has been a part of me for my entire life, of something that I'm going to do, and I don't give up, you know.
Well, you know what's funny is the other important part of it is that you being from Texas, right? So, you know, there was a point in off-road where, you know, the Mickey Thompson era, where we were more connected with Crandon and we were more connected with the Midwest and the South and the East Coast, because he was, you know, one of the primary people who was like, oh man, we gotta go, you know, over to this track in Canada, and we got to go over to this track here and, you know, make sure we're in people's faces, right?
Right.
And so that era had a lot of, I feel like, more connectivity. So when there's somebody in your area, in your town, in your state that has done it, then it makes it achievable.
Sure.
Right. And like for me, just being completely selfish, like, that's what I want. I don't want anybody in any state in America to be like, that's not achievable.
Right.
It's like, it totally is, you know, and whether it's you building a truck in New Hampshire, you know, or, you know, Texas or, you know, Idaho or whatever, it's all on the internet. And, you know, you come out and sleep on the floor and sweep floors at a shop and, you know, get knowledge that way. You can buy a vehicle, you can rent a vehicle. We want people to come out.
Yeah. You can volunteer for a pit crew.
Yeah, volunteer for a team or pit crew, and just, you know,
that help is always needed.
Yeah, start getting that knowledge. But, you know, I think to what I was getting to is, like, I think it's really important that we, you know, we talk about the guys like you who, you know, didn't have somebody handing them everything, you know what I mean, in terms of knowledge and what have you. You just got up and did it. And it's funny too, because I think about the things that shaped me and my brother in particular. And a lot of it was, you know, in the very beginning, seeing off-road racing on television with Wide World of Sports.
Right.
But like you, it was just some photos.
Just some pictures.
Yeah, just like that thing just turned you on to the point that it stuck with you, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, that's the thing I look at and I'm like, that's our power. We got to use that.
Right.
And help spread off-road racing, you know, all over the United States and all over the world.
Yeah,
know?
And I find it interesting that, you know, the sport can be relatable to people that are into it and people that aren't.
Yeah.
You know, the takeaways for people that aren't are, don't let the adversity of what you're trying to do prevent you from doing it. Because what we do at the end of the day is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard financially. It's hard on time. You know, and then when we get out and actually start competing, granted, I'm not an overly competitive person, so I just enjoy being out racing. Right. I don't suffer from the red mist. You can pass me all day long. that's fine. I'll pull over and let you by because you might make a mistake and I won't.
Right.
Coming up behind you. So I don't worry about any of that. But just being able to compete against the course and Mother Nature, those are tales of adversity that transcend being in motorsport.
Yeah.
And so that's part of me doing this is not to get everyone into off-roading. However, if you try it once, you'll give up all your other hobbies.
Yeah, it's funny because, like you said, like I don't want to come off like I have a superiority complex.
Right.
But like there isn't another motorsport like this.
No,
right?
at all.
Like, you're not on a track, per se. You don't have a bathroom right there. You don't have, you can't pull over into your pit, that's right there. Like there's so many different things. And really like it gives you this, well, you go through this adventure, right? And it's like this crazy mental challenge where like you really get off the umbilical cord, right?
Right.
And you get scared, like I've definitely been in a car and been out in the middle of nowhere and been like, man, if I screw up here, I'm in trouble. I'm on my own, right? And and then you're like, why am I doing this? And after being in the car for 4, 5, 6 hours and the fatigue and the whatever discomfort, pain, whatever you're going through, it's like you're doing this because exactly that, right? Because you need to do that to unlock this part of your DNA that turns you on, that turns all these other like lights on in your brain and in your being, and you come back out of that and you're like, hey man, all this shit in life that you think is so challenging, it's not really that bad.
Deal. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Discomfort is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And I say this a lot to people, especially when I see people complaining about, oh man, my life is not that great and I need a better job and this and that. I'm like, well, I know where you can make a lot of money, but it's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
There's more than one option for you.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to tell yourself, I'm going to be uncomfortable to get this done. And that translates directly over to off-road racing because, now I haven't spent a whole lot of time in a trophy truck, but in my truck, it is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
From the moment you get in it to the moment you get out. Now, it is also my zen place. But being uncomfortable, I find, is extremely valuable in progression of human spirit.
Yeah.
If you can take the time and understand what is at the end of being uncomfortable, then you'll put up with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, that's very true. It's like this thing where, we aren't at our best unless we're facing some sort of adversity.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's one of the things in off-road racing that's a very important idea.
Yeah. And that translates to every single human being on the planet.
Yeah.
That's not a motorsport thing. It's not a gearhead thing. It's not a desert thing. It's a people thing, a human person thing. That if you have adversity and you face it directly, understanding that you can handle whatever the situation is, even though you will be uncomfortable, at the end of it, you will be better, either minutely or greatly.
No, it's
in any way.
It's that
you'll
old,
be better.
It's that old adage, pressure makes diamonds.
That's
man.
right.
And like everybody that I know, like at the end of a race, especially, like they have this sort of Zen humility of like, even if they won the race, right? They're just like thankful, right?
Right.
And it's like you see some of the most macho, most badass men at the end of the race turn into these little happy kids that are like, you know what I mean? Like it's like it's completely transformational, right?
Yeah.
And it's cool. I love it, man. And I'm glad you got bit by the bug.
Oh yeah.
And what I'm really glad with is that you got up off your ass and you're like, well, I'm here. I got to get there. Let's figure it out. And you just did it. I hope more people do that.
Yeah. I appreciate that off-road has given me the opportunity to do that. And throughout the last few years, in 2017, we raced the Nora Mexican 1000 after I had such a good time in 16. We took our Dodge down there and finished that. 18, we raced the Mint 400 in the Dodge. 17, 17, 18. And then at the end of 18, I ended up buying out my partners in the truck and buying out my partner in the race series and took it all over myself. Everything kind of went stagnant for a couple of years because I was having to float the bill for it all on my own. And then 21, we raced the Mint again. 23, we raced the Mint. And in 22, speaking of adversity and challenges and you know, human spirit and whatnot, I found out that I'm autistic, and that was a life-changing event for me. But it also, you know, I found that out at 36 years old,
which is crazy.
You know, so I'd gone my entire life living and doing all of these things that I've done with this different operation of my brain, you know, not, and I don't call it a disability and whatnot. I had some friends that when they found out that I was that, they were like, man, how are you going to use this? And I'm like, well, it's not a crutch. I'm not going to lean on it. I'm going to, you know, lean into it. And what I found was that this gave my off-road interests and, you know, career, so to speak, a more important purpose. And that I found through local to me in Lubbock, Texas. There's Texas Tech University, and there's a place called the Burkhart Center. The Burkhart Center is an autism education and research facility, and they teach students ages 18 to 30 how to live on their own, how to hold down jobs. They do internships and things like that. And when I found out, I found that place locally, and I reached out to them, and I said, I need to be of service.
Sure.
You know, I found this thing out, and it has not been a hindrance to me my entire life.
Right.
I haven't made a lot of friends because of the way I operate around people and things like that, but it doesn't bother me about those types of things. And I've been fairly successful in my life. And so I said, I need to do something with this. And I said, what can I do? And they were like, well, can you come talk to the students? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So, you know, go up there and show them videos of racing the Mint and tell them, hey, this is what I do and whatnot. And by the way, you know, I don't want to be known as autistic racer Bryant Blakemore. I want to be known as Bryant Blakemore does all this badass stuff. Oh, by the way, he's also autistic.
Sure.
And so that's what I tried to project to those students there and show them that if they have an interest, it doesn't matter what it is. Mine happens to be cars, which is beneficial in racing as I have a singular focus on that thing.
Right.
You know, but they can see me doing that and say, whoa, their whole lives, people have told them, oh, you can't do those things because you're autistic. And here I am doing things that very few people on the planet do.
Yeah.
And I happen to also be autistic, so it's not a crutch. And we teamed up with them to raise some money at the last Mint. And again, the universe talking to me. Drove the truck there. We made it for the parade. I got contacted and said, hey, BFG wants to put someone in your car for the parade. Do you have room? I said, yeah, I got room and all that. And then they put Kiki Kung in my truck from with BFG and from all the way from Taiwan.
Yeah.
She and her dad were there for the event as part of BFG's program to bring influencers and other types of media people in to experience it. We get to talking. I tell her the whole story about what we're doing, and I'm raising money for the Mint. I set up a pledge drive where people can donate per mile of the race that we complete and all that,
right,
so that they could feel like they were a part of the experience also and follow us on the tracking and all that and be like, oh, Bryant's taking another $1. Bryant's taking another $1, another $1. You know, I tell her all these things, tell her that I was recently diagnosed and all that, and after I get done with my whole story, she looks at me and she says, you're not going to believe this. And I said, well, now you got to tell me if you tell me something like that. And she said, I'm autistic too. And I was diagnosed a year ago as an adult.
Oh, wow.
So the whole time down the Vegas Strip, we were just talking about our connection to cars and our connection to other people and our interactions and our whole lives. And they were identical. So that, again, the universe told me, hey,
Yeah.
buddy, you're in the right spot, and what you're doing in off-roading is beneficial to people more than yourself. And that's
Sure.
what I've always wanted, to be of service to others. All through my Boy Scout career and all that, that's what I've learned is, hey, everything out there is bigger than you, the individual. And if you have an opportunity to share it with people and it be a positive thing for them to look at, then do it. And that whole experience, we ended up, even though we DNF'd, we only made it 175 miles before the truck gave up, which was about 30 miles further than we made it the year before. So I call that a win. We raised almost $12,000.
That's awesome.
For them, and we're able to donate a check for it was like $11,547 or something like that to the Burkhart Center, which will go directly to paying those students for their internship dollars and whatnot. And that ties back into showing that people whose brains function a little differently, it's not a disability most of the time if you can put them in the right spot. And it, for me, solidified my connection with blue collar work, because the way my brain functions lends me to be very good at my job.
Right.
And this is something that I want to work with further, tying it into off-road and how off-road is built on the backs of blue collar.
Yeah.
So can be opportunities for people with autism and whatnot.
Yeah, 100%.
Because their attention to detail and that singular focus and the lack of need to socialize at the workplace and things like that, it lends itself really good to, or really well to, those types of jobs.
Sure.
And so I'm planning on helping the Burkhart more and bringing businesses in to do internship programs with these students, so they can do something more than just flip burgers or whatever. They can actually get a career that they can survive and build and grow upon, and show other people in different communities that, hey, just because someone acts a little weird or is a little bit different doesn't mean that they're invaluable,
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate that what I'm doing through off-road racing has touched a lot of people, and I get messages and people come up to me, in the parking lot and whatnot. Hey, we saw what you were doing, and my kid's autistic, or my brother, or this or that, and I
think
really appreciate that.
No, I think it's rad, and I think it's important because, I think that one of the problems with the way that our healthcare system works is they want to, and it's by design. They want to put everybody in a box and be like,
Sure.
oh yeah, you're over here, right?
Yeah, and here's some pills.
Yeah,
Take those.
exactly.
And
and then you're just you're told what you are, right? And it's funny, I'm dyslexic, and I remember as a kid, they didn't quite tell me that I was dumb, but I was definitely not like they're like,
might have been hinted at.
Hey, you're not the smart. I do remember the counselor at Helix High School literally told me, like, hey, you should focus on being a construction worker. And I made more money than that dude did by the time I was 20. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it because I found graphic design, I found something that I was passionate about and good at.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important that, what you're doing, because you're showing by example, right? You're like, oh yeah, by the way, it's kind of like when, a movie star or an athlete comes out and they're like, hey, by the way, I'm autistic, or I'm dyslexic, or I have, this thing wrong with me. And everybody's like, well, you have your,
it's never stopped.
yeah,
That's weird.
Yeah. And in some ways, to your point, like, I think it's an advantage. Like, for me, it allows me to see things in a certain way, and it allows me to take a lot of information and distill it down. Right. And kind of not the opposite way, but excuse me. But yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. And everything in the universe that I've ever interacted with has led me to these points.
Yeah.
And I credit to, again, I'm not a competitive person. Winning is not high on my list. Participating and finishing are, so the 2 DNFs that I have at the Mint have really irked me into, now we're going to build a trophy truck and go do it for real.
Yeah.
So that's the way that I operate. I don't need to win. I don't need to be first place and all that kind of stuff. It's not that important to me. I don't care if I get passed, but creating the experience and having the opportunity to share that experience with other people. I always bring people in on my pit crews and as my co-drivers that have never done this type of stuff before. Now, granted, they need to be able to do the position or provide some sort of value for me and the team, right. that's useful. But I like sharing this with everybody that I possibly can, because I hope that they will see what I'm doing and not go buy their own race car and do it, which of course I hope they do that. But I hope that they look at their life and say, hey, I want to do this thing. Bryant does this crazy stuff and, he just goes and does it. So why don't I just go and do it? And to be able to represent that in an underappreciated community, in the autism community is really special and very important to me. And I am really grateful that I have opportunities to be vocal about that because of the response that I've gotten from others, people that have reevaluated their own lives and thought, well, maybe I might be on the spectrum too, because a lot of the things that he says he does, I kind of do those things too. And man, the biggest thing that we can do for each other is help each other with mental health.
100%.
And get those conversations happening, and don't be scared about it. You've made it this far in life. You're fine. You can keep going. And if I can do that through off-road racing, I want to do it.
Definitely.
Show it that way. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming, brother. That was awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to doing more work with you. I want to get you out to Texas and talk about some of the things that we can do out there. And if building racing in Texas means that I don't race anymore, I will give it all up in order to build things in my home state.
I appreciate that, but I'm pretty sure we could do both.
I'm down for that.
All right, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you.